Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Scares That Shaped Us, a podcast about horror writers and the stories that made them. I'm your host, Matthew Jackson, and we have another returning guest this week. One of our original friends of the show, Daniel Kraus, is here. We're going to talk to Daniel about his amazing new novel, Angel Down, which is one of the best books you're going to read in any genre in 2025. And we're going to talk about the amazing Creepshow from 1982, directed by George A. Romero and written by Stephen King. It's a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. But first, I am covering the Fantasia International Film Festival for the next few days. Last week and this week are Fantasia Fest time, so I am watching a lot of screeners. I'm covering virtually. I'm not, sadly, actually in Montreal for the festival, though I would love to be. And in my wanderings through Fantasia's screening library so far, I have come across a few titles that I adore and I hope that other people go and seek out, including one that already is extant out there and has been for decades. And that is a giallo film called The House with Laughing Windows. It is about a painter who goes to a small community to restore a creepy fresco in a church and uncovers a mystery about the seemingly long dead painter who created this piece in the first place. Love The House with Laughing Windows. If you love giallo films and you haven't seen it, go find it. It's wonderful. I also saw a couple of films that are not out yet for the general public. They will be in the near future, hopefully, fingers crossed that they find distribution. One of them is a film called Hellcat, which is about a woman who wakes up in a travel trailer that is moving down a highway, and the driver of that travel trailer starts talking to her through a speaker and tells her that she's been infected with something and that he has to get her to a hospital or something horrible is going to happen. It's essentially 10 Cloverfield Lane on wheels, at least at first. I don't want to give away where it leads, but I adored this movie. I hope that it finds distribution. As far as I know, as of this recording, it doesn't have distro yet. I really hope that changes. It's fantastic, wonderful, high concept horror thriller film. And the other already does have distribution. It will be coming to Shudder in 2026, and that is Mother of Flies, the new film from the Addams family of horror filmmakers who made films like The Deeper You Dig and Hellbender and Where the Devil Roams. This is their latest film. It is about a teenage girl with cancer and her father who go out into the woods to meet this healer woman who claims that she can cure cancer, and the healer woman is a witch, and darkness ensues. I think it's the best film they've ever made, and I'm a fan. I've loved all of their stuff. I've loved the dark, heavy stuff. I've loved the sillier stuff they've done as well. They are titans in the realm of DIY indie horror filmmaking. They hit another level with Mother of Flies. It will be out again sometime in 2026 through Shudder, and I will be telling everyone about it then, and I'm telling everyone about it now. I loved Mother of Flies, one of my favorites of the year. So that's 3 films to keep on your radar, including one that you can go find and watch right now. I'm sure I'll have more to talk about with Fantasia Fest in the next few days and weeks if you follow me on my socials, or if you are reading my reviews at Pop Heist and Dread Central. I've got some stuff coming up, especially at Pop Heist, so stay tuned for that. But that is enough of me rambling about horror movies I watched for now. Let's head over to our interview with Daniel Kraus. Joining us this week on The Scares That Shaped Us is one of our original guests and a very early friend of the show. He is the New York Times best-selling author of books like Whalefall, Pay the Piper, The Ghost That Ate Us, and much more. His latest novel, Angel Down, is available July 29th. Daniel Kraus, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me back. I'm super jazzed to be here.
It is always great talking to you. it's especially nice to talk to you right now because Angel Down is I don't want to say it's your masterpiece because I'm sure you have other good books in you, of course, but like it is one of those books that just will knock you on your ass. It's an incredible piece of fiction, and I'm curious. Oh, I'm curious about a lot of things, but first, for anyone who maybe hasn't heard about Angel Down yet, could you give our listeners a little taste of what the book is?
Yeah, I mean, on a plot level, it's about these 5 privates in World War One who are left behind on purpose when their unit moves on, so that they can go out to no man's land and euthanize a soldier that's out there screaming and dying, which is something that you had to do sometimes back then. But they go out and they don't find a soldier; they find an angel that's been shot out of the sky with artillery fire, and they rescue the angel from the barbed wire. And everything's good at that point, right? Like the angel is miraculous and could maybe end the war, could maybe do all sorts of amazing things. But each of the men starts to develop personal desires and personal greed over what they want the angel to do for them. And those desires sort of tear the men apart and threaten to turn this sort of angelic encounter into something far more hellish, just because they can't agree on what to do.
Yeah, it is. Also, that we have to talk about the notable thing. We have to talk about the elephant in the room here, which is this book is 1 sentence long.
That is right.
And I don't mean it's 1 sentence on 1 page. I mean it's a 90,000 word, give or take, sentence, which I think people who follow you have known for a while now, ever since preview copies of this thing started to circulate. What came first for you? Was it the story, or was it, I want to write a book that's 1 sentence long?
Oh yeah, it definitely wasn't that. It was the story. I started writing the book as just sort of a normal, quote unquote, normal book, where I was writing in more or less normal style, and it just wasn't really working for me very well. Like it was fine. It was conveying the story in a decent enough way, but it wasn't setting me on fire. So I was worried. I was annoyed with it. You know, I'd spent a few weeks on it, and I was frustrated that it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. So I just sat down one day and started thinking, okay, what is this book about? What are the themes of this book? Which is not something I normally sit down and do. Usually it's much more organic or just natural. But I really thought about it, and I thought that one of the thesis statements of the book was that World War I was the advent of mechanized death. Up until then, it had always been sort of one person murders another person, and you have some sense of the stakes of that because you're right there doing it. But World War I and the technology of World War I began a process by which we are removed from the act of killing, and therefore the industrial war machine becomes just that. It becomes a machine. It becomes an engine that has all sorts of reasons to want to perpetuate itself. So to sum that up, basically, I saw World War I as the beginning of a wheel that of death and destruction that once we started it rolling, it can't be stopped. So I thought, could I write the book in a style that would mirror that? Could I write the book in the form of a wheel? And so my idea was, what if I wrote it in 1 sentence that looped back on itself, so that the whole book was a circle that once you started reading it, in theory, you could never get out of the loop, which was a crazy idea. But really, after 10 minutes of trying to start the book over in that style, I knew immediately that it was the right call. It just like the words just seemed to pour out, and they felt electric and they felt new, and not using periods and sentence ends and beginnings. It shakes up how you write. Like all your normal tricks don't work anymore, and you have to kind of relearn how to write. And that was really exciting, and communicated not only the larger theme, but it also just made it feel like you're in battle and you can barely breathe, and you can't think of anything except go forward, survive, survive, survive. So it worked on all sorts of levels, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it creates the feeling of watching a movie that is one unbroken take, like 1917 was a few years ago. Sam Mendes' 1917.
Mm-hmm.
It has that same sort of wonder, like you are in it with these guys and you're just gonna go. And one of the things I found really interesting on just a craft level was there is this urgency to the words that comes from the style that you're working in, and it is the kind of book, at least for me, that I had trouble putting down because it felt wrong to put it down. It felt like I'm leaving Cyril Bagger, who is your point of view character, as this novel kicks off. I'm leaving Cyril in whatever this situation is, and like there's no clear like resolution, so I have to keep going. But what's interesting is there are still chapter breaks and paragraphs and all of that stuff organized into something that is still reader friendly. Did you organize it in that way as you were writing it, or was this the kind of thing that you had to kind of go back and pace it out in terms of where the chapter breaks would go?
I mean, once I started writing it all as one sentence, I was breaking it out as I went. Like, I didn't want the reader to have to open a book and just see an unbroken wall of text for 300 pages. I just thought that was needlessly unfriendly and was more just like, look at me, look what I can do. And I didn't want to be show-offy in that sense, to the deleterious effect of actually reading the book. And so I decided I would just, without breaking the sentence, I would just chunk it out. I would just have spaces in there. And I quickly realized that made it even better, because I kept breaking it on the word and that was really cool. I liked every single paragraph, if you want to call them paragraphs, begins with the word and that felt to me like, again, putting you really, really right there in the trenches where you just can't catch your breath. And there's always something else. And then there's this, and then there's this, and then there's this. And I really liked how that started to look. It felt like a really definite, strong choice regardless. And then I just do in chapters, just sort of like, what the hell, why not? And just started introducing chapter titles without breaking the flow of the sentence. I just felt that these organizing principles almost were more interesting now that there were no ends to anything and no beginnings to anything. To instill chapters on top of that also just felt like an interesting choice. And again, makes it a little more reader friendly. You know, I think a lot of people that hear it's all one sentence, they get a little bit scared. But I'm here to tell you, don't be scared. It's a different kind of reading experience, but I don't think it's that much more difficult than any other book to read.
It's definitely not. It's definitely a very accessible book. Cyril is a very fun character to follow. Like he's not really a nice guy, but he's an interesting guy that you want to keep reading about, and you want to keep seeing how he's going to navigate this crazy situation. And it's also, it's historical fiction. It is right there in the Western Front of World War I that we know so well from many different fictional and real depictions of it. One thing that I loved when I found out that this was your next book, like when the announcement came and I read the little blurb and went, oh, is like, this is the idea of angels intervening in the Western Front of World War I is it dates to World War I. It's more than 100 years old. We have the the Angels of Mons story, and we have Arthur Machen's The Bowman, about which is my favorite because it's about the ghost of the Battle of Agincourt intervening to stop the Germans. Did you feel at all? Did you go back and read those accounts as you were working on this? Did you feel beholden to them at all, or how important was it for you to cut your own path through that lore?
Well, yes and no. I wasn't aware of those stories at all when I started writing this. I only discovered them in research as I was going along, and I was delighted, obviously, that there was actually a history of angel stories in World War One, a vibrant history. But that was a total surprise to me. Angels of Mons, which you mentioned, that I worked into the book, and that was, of course, as you just were talking about, that was the Machen. Is it Machen, Arthur?
Machen, I believe, is how you pronounce it.
That was based on a fictional story he published that got reproduced all over the globe, but without the note that it was fiction. So soldiers read it, they thought it was reporting, and they began to look for angels all over the place. And there were other stories about angels intervening in World War I battles. It was probably all sort of kicked off by that story. But the point is that they're out there and they're sort of hoping for such a thing. And understandably, because they're all existing in hell on earth. They're, no man's land between any two trenches is craters and soot and guts and body parts. And it's just absolute hell. And so, I think it's natural that you would want to find the opposite, like some sort of crystal clear path of cleanliness and beauty that could just take you right out of the mess. And that, at least in my book, is what happens, at least at the beginning, when they're going into no man's land and they see their first sight of the angel is just this column of light.
Yeah.
I think it's the kind of thing that all of them would want to find. It's kind of wish fulfillment. Like, if there could be anything in that world of slime and blood and mud you would want to see, it's this pure, beautiful light that would just be almost like a rainbow bridge out of there.
Yeah, it's such an interesting contrast, and it's very interesting to me that you did not know those stories before you started, because when I read the summary, I was like, oh, he's playing with those classic angels on the Western Front stories. I want to ask a little bit about Cyril, because, as I've already mentioned, I think he's an amazing character. He's so fun to follow, and he emerges in this story as not just a con man, but a guy who's very clearly developed a way of living that is, I think he even says it at one point, of his thing is I don't care about anyone else.
Yeah. Right.
And then he has these moments where he sort of maybe starts to care about other people, or maybe it's all part of one long con that he's running to try to survive the war. Setting aside all the formalism fun of this book and the big historical fiction hooks of it, how did Cyril become your way into this book?
I know that I wanted there to be a character who had somewhere to go, right? Like, I wanted somebody who had, if this were an 80s movie, an 80s war movie with Sylvester Stallone, he would start amazing and he would end amazing, and we would just be there for the kind of action ride. So I wanted to create a character that had a place he could ascend to. So I wanted to start with somebody who was bad, for lack of a better word. He's alone and has convinced himself that he wants to be alone, and that he's the only one who's smart enough to get out of this war alive. And he's going to do it by not caring about anyone and rooking over anyone he needs to keep him out of harm's way. And in a weird kind of way, the angel's almost a red herring. What he learns, what Bagger learns in the book is to care for Arno, who's this other soldier, who's a 14-year-old kid who lied about his age to get in the army. And really, that's kind of his arc. His story is to accept that he's got someone else he cares about, which is a tough thing for him to accept, because once you're out in a place like the battlefields of World War One and you care about somebody else, well, suddenly that makes your life a lot more dangerous, because you're going to want to protect them as well as yourself. And so suddenly now you've got 2 people to worry about. Or if you love all the men in your battalion, now you've got 100 people to worry about. And so it's much easier if we don't open ourselves up in that way. And that's kind of his journey. It's very, very simple in a way. Like, he just has to learn to care for one person that's not himself. It's such a small thing, but that's kind of the bargain that the angel opens up with him.
I think that in that way, I think this book makes a great, for lack of a better term, double feature with Whalefall. Mm-hmm. In that they are very epic stories, but they also have this very sort of intimate emotional focus that makes them both work really well. And before we move on to our topic, the story you picked today, I do have to ask, speaking of Whalefall, I know Brian Duffield is working on the film. How's everything going? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling very, very good. I've been out to the set a few times. And so, there's limited things I can say. But what I can say is that Brian is doing a hell of a job. If he is absolutely the right person to be making this for all sorts of reasons, some of which have to do with just how he was raised and his life story. He's taking him and the 20th Century Fox and Imagine, and everyone is taking a huge, huge swing with this book or with this movie, which is not an obvious movie to try to make in any way. So there's never been anything like it. I can tell you that much. Who knows if it'll be the greatest movie ever made or the biggest disaster in history, but one way or the other, either way, there's never been anything like it. Like, the footage that I'm seeing coming out of those stomachs is just absolutely unique. And again, I've only been on set for a handful of days, but Austin Abrams and Josh Brolin are both just born for this movie. They're so good in it. So that's all I can say, is that I'm extremely hopeful. Of course, I'm involved. I co-wrote the script with Brian, so I have a vested interest in this. So you don't have to believe me, but I am really, really impressed by what I've seen so far.
I will be there day one for the Whalefall movie. I can't wait. I'm excited that you're excited. But we're going to talk about a different movie now, because we're on a little bit of a Stephen King run on the show right now, but this is interesting because this is Stephen King and George Romero. We're going to talk about Creepshow, the 1982 horror comedy anthology, directed by Romero, written by King. And it's just an absolute blast of a movie. It still is. I rewatched it last night. It's still Creepshow. It's fantastic. Daniel, I know you have a long history with both of these horror creators in your life. What can you remember about the first time you experienced Creepshow?
Yeah, I remember it very well. And there's actually 2 versions of this story we can talk about. There's the first time I encountered the movie, and then the first time I encountered the sort of graphic novel version that they put out at the same time. But the movie, I remember, I had a next door neighbor who had, I think, Cinemax. It could have been HBO, but for some reason I feel like it was Cinemax. And it was in the summer. I remember that I was a little kid, and I was over at his house, and we were in the living room, and Creepshow was just playing on TV. I didn't know what it was. It was just sort of playing in the background, and it was that scene in the crate story where the the janitor is being dragged into the crate, and there's just so much blood. And I'd never in my life seen that much blood. And I remember just, standing there while other things were going on. The family was moving around talking, and just sort of like from across the room watching that scene and just feeling extremely anxious that there was so much blood. And Romero has the lights go red at that point. So just everything's red. I had just never seen anything like it. And it scared me. And I didn't know probably for a while what that scene was even from. But eventually figured it out and watched it. I probably rented the VHS as soon as such things were possible. But yeah, that was the first taste of it. And a lot of like my favorite media, like from the last time we spoke about the Twilight Zone episode, there are these things that caught me really off guard and really disturbed me. And I sort of kept my distance a little bit after that. Anything that would scare me, I would kind of scuttle away from, but be interested in, and eventually dare myself to find my way back to it.
It's like the crate. It's a crate in your mind that you want to know. But so for anyone who might not know, this is very much King and Romero, who by this point were pretty well entrenched. I mean, Romero had been in the business for well over a decade. King had been not quite a decade, but they were well entrenched in the minds of America as like horror guys. And it was their riff on EC Comics. It was like the Vault of Fear and Tales from the Crypt and all of those things. So what we get here with are 5 stories with a prologue and an epilogue. By the way, just to get it out of the way up front, everybody, the little kid in the prologue and the epilogue is best-selling legendary horror author Joe Hill, aka Stephen King's son. So that's a fun little bit of trivia. But 5 stories, all of them written by King, and they are very much delivered in this tongue-in-cheek, we're all having fun with spooky monsters and blood tone. And I know we just got done talking about a very dramatic novel with Angel Down, and you have, a lot of your books tend toward the dramatic and not as much the comedic. But I think that comedic tone has always been there in one way or another in your books. I think you're able to meld it really well. Do you think Creepshow is kind of the origin for you of the idea that something can be scary and funny at the same time?
I have no idea, but like it's as good as theory as any, because Creepshow was such a formative movie for me. Certainly one of the movies I've watched more than any in my life. Night of the Living Dead is number 1 for me by a long shot. But number 2 is probably, as far as just volume of time seen it, it's probably my second most viewed movie. So it's got to be in my DNA somewhere. As a kid, as kind of explained by that first glimpse I had of Creepshow, I don't know that the funny parts of it clicked in with me, when you're, whatever I was when I was 9 or whatever I was when I saw it, I was just scared. And there's a certain garishness of horror in Creepshow that as an adult you can identify as over the top and silly, and you can kind of laugh along with it. But if you're young enough, it's just a horror show. Like it's the equivalent of going to a local haunted house, which maybe an adult could also laugh at. But as a kid, it's just things running at you, screaming. And there's nothing really funny about it. And that's why I think the movie like Creepshow ages so well, because it ages with you. As a kid, it was just pure terror. And then as you get older, you start to identify the humor in it, because now you're able to compare it to other horror movies that have a more serious tone. And it's just a total delight of a movie. Like it doesn't matter how many times you watch it, you just get wrapped up, and it is the perfect, tonally, it's just perfect. And when I saw Creepshow and then saw the graphic novel that came out, At the same time, I originally borrowed that from the local library in my small Iowa town, and the graphic novel had just as much impact, I think, because it was there. Like I owned it, or it was in my possession, unlike the movies that were ephemeral and disappeared. And I could really pour over it. And it was I didn't really have any other comic books, certainly none that were also movies. So it was the only movie I knew of that had this sort of book version of the movie. It was different than an adaptation of a novel. Like this was like a comic book. So it was really like watching the movie again, and being able to analyze it like that and go through it and compare the book to the movie. I'm sure that did a lot of things to my brain and kind of taught me about writing, and how that can be visualized in different media. And around the same time, or somewhere in this neighborhood of time, was when I read Stephen King's Danse Macabre, which to this day is the most vital book probably I've ever read, as far as like introducing me to horror in a larger sense. I think I read that book in middle school, and in that book they talk about the old EC horror comics, which I had, of course, never heard of. I just was a kid in the middle of nowhere in Iowa. There's no way I'd ever know EC horror comics were a thing. But I immediately was able to say, oh, he's talking about Creepshow, basically.
Yeah.
And then I really wished I could read those. And then when I was in college, they started putting out those giant compendiums of the old EC comics, which I ran into at another library and started reading those. So Creepshow also was the beginning of sort of a lifelong fascination with EC comics. So it really started a lot for me.
Yeah, it's Danse Macabre, by the way. Like we talk about, and I say we, I mean like the larger writer community. We talk about Stephen King's On Writing a lot as an essential piece of nonfiction. But like, if you're a horror fan, or you want to be a horror fan, you're like a budding horror fan, go find Danse Macabre and read it, because there is so much great stuff in there, and it illuminates so much of how King thinks about horror fiction, specifically how he thinks about horror short fiction, because he grew up on those, not just EC comics, but like Roger Corman movies and Friday midnight movie features with the creature features and things like that, where like the entire point was to wind you up to some sort of thrilling and hopefully stomach churning conclusion, and then deliver the punchline, which is what Creepshow is. Right. And it's done incredibly well. Like the craft on display in this movie is so great, from the way that Romero lights it to the creature effects and everything in between. But it is still that like classic horror thing of set them up, knock them down.
Oh yeah,
which I adore. And like this to me is like, if it felt, when I first saw Creepshow, it kind of felt like reading Night Shift for the first time. Mm-hmm. His first collection, which is full of stories like that. So apart from the prologue and epilogue, there are 5 stories in this movie. Father's Day, The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, Something to Tide You Over, The Crate, and They're Creeping Up on You. Do you have a favorite of the segments?
I should have anticipated this question.
If you don't, that's fine. Wow. Like they're all great.
I mean, that's the crazy thing, is they're all great.
Yeah.
Like if Creepshow was made today, it would have been 3 stories, and you could take any of these 3 and it would have been a good movie. The fact that there's 5 is insanity. Like, it's such an embarrassment of riches, and all 5 are good. And I think there's been different times in my life where I've chosen any of those 5 as my favorite. So the question is, how do I feel today?
Yeah.
God, it's so hard. I love all 5 of them. I guess my mind goes to Something to Tide You Over. I feel like maybe that's the one I love most right now. The movie is just filled with actors just delivering the best performances ever, having so much fun. But Leslie Nielsen in that one is so good that I think I get excited whenever when it's time for that segment to come up. It's just so weird. Like it's basically, it is the most classic EC comic story ever, in that someone is wronged and they dead and they come back to life as a undead corpse and they kill everyone. It's the same story as Father's Day, really.
Yeah.
But the whole idea about burying someone up to the neck in the sand is such a weirdly specific, terrifying concept. And all the visuals of it are so interesting. I just love the fact that it takes place on a beach, and Leslie Nielsen's fancy home is so bizarre. It's just the music out throughout the movie it's one of the greatest musical scores, horror movie scores of all time.
Yeah,
like John Harrison, and it's at its best in that segment. I don't know. I just love them all.
I love them all too, and like you said, like the other thing worth mentioning is like there's a prologue and an epilogue and 5 stories in 120 minutes.
Yeah,
like this is not a film that stretches. And obviously now we have a Creepshow TV series on Shudder, which will run all of their stories into like the 45-minute range. Not all, but most. So you can imagine like a version of this, like, oh, it's Creepshow. Oh, 3 stories. You're in, you're out with 3, but they pack them all in, and none of them feel like they get short shrift. None of them feel hurried or glossed over. None of them feel like filler, and each one of them has their own distinctive. Any one of these stories, you can pick a visual out and go like, oh, that's one of the scariest things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
The corpse asking for cake in Father's Day. The and Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill is one of the more famous ones, because obviously like Stephen King is there doing like a full Looney Tunes exaggerated character piece. I always go back to that scene, that bit in Jordy Verrill where he first touches the meteor and he gets those little like bumps on his finger. And he's freaking out because like that to me is so frightening. The idea that you would touch something and there'd be these little lymph things on your fingers. And then go ahead.
No, I was going to say, in some ways, the one story that sticks out is probably Jordy Verrill, in that it feels a little different than the other ones, because there's less plot. Like there's just something. He touches this meteor and that's it. He just turns into a plant. It also has just like unbelievably depressing ending. Where the other ones are all sort of cackling horror, where you sort of sense that there's a lot of playfulness going on. But the end of Jordy Verrill is just shockingly sad.
Well, and that's the other thing is like it is probably it's the one story in the film that isn't about someone getting comeuppance for some wrong they committed.
Right. No one did anything wrong in that one.
It's
wrong.
It's just a guy who lives on a farm who's like, oh, hey, what is this? And his curiosity leads to him turning into a plant monster and committing suicide. It's just
a story about bad luck.
Yeah.
And what makes it even more depressing is the main character is this guy who's clearly his life has been nothing but bad luck. He's living alone in this dilapidated farm. It's a lot like the last time I was on your show. We talked about The Invaders, which was just an old woman living alone in a house. It's a very much similar setup. But it's just this man who's barely has enough money to feed himself, and he touches this meteor, and just his terrible life gets even more terrible, and then he has to shoot himself. And it's like, boy, that is a tough pill to take.
Yeah, it is a weird, like, but it what's funny about that is we just talked about the ways in which it's an outlier, but it doesn't feel like an outlier in the within the overall tone of this film. It fits right in. And something to tide you over, I mean, you alluded to it. I love how elaborate it is.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Especially following Jordy Verrill, which is so simple. It's just
yes.
It's this guy he's a jilted lover and he wants revenge, but he doesn't just want revenge. He wants to videotape the revenge, and not just videotape the revenge. He wants Ted Danson to see the revenge unfolding.
It's so complicated.
It's so complicated, and he is clearly so. I will forever think about. It's a smaller moment, but Leslie Nielsen, who, yeah, like you said, is amazing in it, has that moment where he has set his traps. They're both buried in the sand. They're both on camera. And he goes back to his house and pours himself a drink and does this little jaunty walk as he's going over to the cameras. Like he is so happy that his big plan worked out. And it's just this completely over the top, like revenge gone wrong story. But I love how elaborate and crazy it gets. And then you have the crate, which is just, there's a monster in that crate.
Yeah.
But it's not just there's a monster in that crate. It's, wait, how can we like use the monster in the crate? Yeah. And that one has my favorite performance in the entire movie, which is Adrienne Barbeau, who is having the time of her life as the drunken wife of an academic.
I mean, there's something to be said for movies where everyone is deep into their roles and they're all Daniel Day-Lewising it, and it's this wonderful transportational cinema. And then there's something to be said for these movies like this, which are so rare, where everyone is having so much fun. It's just like the line between them, their performances, and them like laughing as soon as Romero said cut is probably so close. Like they're having a party on this movie set and you're invited, and it's just so much fun to watch.
Yeah, it's a blast. And the crate was always, it's funny. Like you said, it depends on the day. What stands out to you most about this movie? And I have seen it many times. Like I rented it on VHS when I was like 17 and watched it for the first time. And I've watched it several times since. I wrote a whole thing for Mental Floss about this movie years ago where I was digging into the making of it and stuff. So I know it pretty well, but I, for whatever reason, have always sort of thought of the crate not as a bad story or anything like that, but it was always kind of the one I was least excited to see. Mm-hmm. And then last night watching it, something just clicked that hadn't been there before. And it may be, if we go pop psychology on it, it may be like, well, I'm married now, and sometimes I feel inadequate in my professional life, and sometimes I have that keeping up with the Joneses thing that gnaws at you, and the crate is very much an embodiment of that. But it also could have just been like, hey, I just had fun with it this time.
Well, I think you're onto something, because I had the same reaction when I was a kid or a teenager or whatever. My least favorite one was probably the crate, and I think it's because the other ones are so kid friendly in a way. Like it's so obvious what's happening.
Yeah,
if you're 10 years old, you understand what's happening. The crate is a slightly more mature one in the sense that it's these academics, and there's something going on with teaching assistants, and there's marital issues. And as a kid, it's probably even hard to keep track of what exactly is going on between these characters. But as an adult, it feels like what it is, which is the centerpiece of the movie. Like it's probably the longest segment of the movie. It's the one that feels as close to a feature film as any of them. It has the biggest concentration of stars, probably. I I think it's very clearly the centerpiece of the film.
Yeah.
And but it's one that I feel exactly the same as you. Hit me a little bit less. There seemed to be a lot of shoe leather when I was a kid. It's like, what is all this stuff at this college party? What is going on here? I don't care. Let's get to the monster. But yeah, as you get older, it's just sort of wonderful, the whole thing. And a lot of that is Adrienne Barbeau, and just how, out of all the over the top performances in Creepshow, hers is the furthest over the top. And it's just like, as an actor, you probably get so few chances to go that big in your career, and boy, does she go big.
She really does. It's fantastic. And oh gosh, I just lost my train of thought on the crate. Oh yeah, no, I remember what it was. I also am a sucker now, at least, like as I read and experience more horror over the years, I am a sucker for a horror story about. The great thing about the crate is the crate never moves. The crate's always in the same place. It's about luring people into that room and getting them close. And I love that. I love a horror story where there's a static thing. Mm-hmm. And all you have to do to not die is avoid the static thing, which is in one place. But
oh yeah,
curiosity and scheming and a bunch of other things get the better of people.
It reminds me of Cronenberg's The Fly, where all you have to do is not go in that pod. It reminds me, it's just something else popped in my head. It reminds me of something else. Kathy Koja's novel, The Cipher, where all you have to do is not go in that room where the bottomless hole is. Like, I feel the same. I like these concepts where there's just something over there, and you just don't go over there. But like, the way that writers can like cause people to do it over and over and over is really satisfying, because it's so counterintuitive. Like, just stay away from the crate. But yes, but the plot mechanics of how they keep getting people to do it is so enjoyably frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it, like you said, it is the centerpiece of the movie because it has that classic feel of there's something terrifying right inside there, right under that lid. You shouldn't look because it's dangerous, but you can't help yourself, and you have to go further and see what's lurking. And then, like, I love that the movie flips it, and basically the inverse happens with their creeping up on you, which is the one that I think people are the most reluctant to rewatch for yeah. creepy reasons. But like, that's a story about a guy who has done everything he can to make his own crate and to keep everyone out of this hermetically sealed box that he lives in.
Interesting take. Yeah.
And then, you know, which I believe, if I remember my like history of Creepshow correctly, like they almost didn't make their creeping up on you.
Right.
It was the one where they were like, we're kind of tight on time and budget, and I don't know if we should do this one. And they fought for it, and I'm glad they did, because it is such an amazing way to end this parade of horrors with a guy.
So good. It's so good, and it has like the best final image. Like, you can't end on anything but that. I know it was Romero's favorite of the 5 stories. It is, boy, like you could think all day about how to sequence these stories, but you got to end with the creeping up on you. It has such one of the great horror images of all time that ends it.
Yes. Which apparently wreaked havoc on the ecosystem of the Pittsburgh area, because like, for those who don't know, and I mean, we've been spoiling this movie the whole time, so you probably know if you're still listening, but like, it's E.G. Marshall plays a miserly old man who is a germaphobe and has put himself in this this apartment that is completely germ free, and it's all Spartan and white and clean, and cockroaches start getting in, and the story ends when the cockroaches essentially descend en masse on this guy, and then you see his body laying on the floor, and the shot reveals that his body is completely full of cockroaches, and they burst out of him until there's probably like 3 solid feet of cockroach on the floor.
Yeah. Yep.
And I remember seeing Romero interviewed. There's actually a really good, there's a feature-length documentary about the making of Creepshow, y'all. I think it's called Just Desserts.
Yep.
Which I bought when I was doing a bunch of Creepshow research years back, and it's very entertaining. The roaches were not like native to the United States. They were shipped in, and they were kept in their own trailer, which was a horrible smelling thing. And you can't really wrangle roaches. So Romero, I remember him telling the story that when they let the roaches loose in the room, the roaches filled every available space to the point that he said, like, you could take the telephone apart and the telephone would just be completely full of, there would be a telephone shape of roach. So that was a thing they did.
Yeah. And the legend is like that the area where they shot it is still has those roaches in it. Like they're still there, this invasive species.
Because they simply could not account for every single roach. There was no way. And,
it's when you get to that story in the movie and it ends, it's just so wonderful. Like the cavalcade of horrors in this movie is just, it never stops. Like it delivers one after another. And it is just such a credit to Romero and King that there's just no bad apple. And that is just so rare.
Yeah.
And
it's really,
and just to talk about like a personal thing, I guess, is that, Creepshow and Night of the Living Dead are the movies that, they're my favorite 2 movies. And I got to write a couple episodes of the Creepshow TV show. And that was such a huge kind of end of a circle for me. And one of those episodes, they're both very different. One of them is called Pipe Screams. And Joe Lynch directed it. And of course, I'm biased because I wrote it, but I feel like Pipe Screams is right up there with the best segments of the Creepshow TV series. And the reason I like it so much is that the TV show had so many great episodes, but what I like about Pipe Screams is it feels like it could have been in Creepshow. Like it feels like one of those episodes that, and credit goes to Joe for just getting the tone, could have been the 6th story in Creepshow. It feels part of what he was trying to do. And then a couple of years ago, they started making a Creepshow comic book, and I got to do a story in that. And it really is satisfying and just fun. And it's one of those little things where you just feel like you got to participate in something that was so important to you. Maybe one of these things that I did will be the scares that shape someone else,
Yeah. And by the way, like if y'all have not gone and watched the Creepshow TV show, which is on Shudder, it's fantastic. You get stories from a lot of great horror. Like we mentioned Joe Hill. Joe Hill wrote stories that are in the Creepshow TV show. Daniel did a bunch of other great writers. And a bunch of great directors, like Greg Nicotero was big into directing that. Like it's a cavalcade of super horror talent working on that show. So yeah, and you can watch them in any order you want. They just are standalone stories. It's great. Before we go though, I did want to ask about Creepshow 2. Do you share the same sort of fondness for Creepshow 2 that you do for Creepshow?
Well, Creepshow 2 is not as good, but it also would have been fair game for this show too. Like I also saw Creepshow 2 when I was relatively young, and it also scared me. We had this very early in Iowa where I was, this very early form of pay-per-view. There's like this weird channel. I don't know if everyone had this, that would just, you could call a phone number and you could play, and they would play like a movie at a certain time, and you could watch it. I remember ordering Young Guns to see through this pay-per-view. But when you weren't watching a movie, they just played ads all the time, the previews. And I must have seen the Creepshow 2 preview a million times, and it just scared the shit out of me. The first story in Creepshow 2 isn't very good, but The Raft is a classic. The Raft is fantastic. And the Hitchhiker, is it just called The Hitchhiker?
Yeah.
Feels slim when you watch it sometimes, but like it does have a kind of creepy, icky, sort of gruesome power to it that of all the stories, it feels dark. Of all the stories and all the creep shows, there's something about the Hitchhiker one that feels exceptionally dark to me. It feels less playful. It feels more disturbing in a way. So I do have a lot of affection for it. And it does have its moments where it really, really works. We should also, as a public service announcement, tell people to avoid Creepshow 3.
Oh, no. Yeah. Don't watch Creepshow 3.
At all costs.
No, don't.
And instead watch Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, which was basically Romero's Creepshow 3.
Yeah. Tales from the Dark Side, the movie is rad. Tales from the Dark Side in general is great. But yeah, Creepshow 3 was made without the involvement of any of the principals from either of the other creep shows or the TV show. It is just it is an effort. It is an independent movie effort to capitalize on a popular title with a different anthology. It's not great, everybody. I watched it for work once, and once was enough. Before we wrap up, I want to talk about Creepshow through the lens of a drum I beat a lot as a horror critic and historian, for lack of a better word, and that we talked about last time you were here, because we were talking about Pay the Piper, which you co-wrote with George Romero. And that is George Romero's versatility as a storyteller. I think that so many people see him as see him as the Night of the Living Dead zombie guy who evolved his zombies over decades and, made a few other movies. He was so good at playing with the horror genre, and you see it in so many of his other films. You see it in Martin. You see it in The Dark Half. You see it in Monkey Shines, The Crazies. He had a knack for twisting things. And I know Stephen King wrote all of these stories, and we can feel the Stephen King tone in them, but it cannot be overstated how much Romero's sense of humor and ability to shift gears affects the success of this movie. And I'm curious for you, like, where does this movie fit in the Romero legacy?
Yeah, what made Romero one of the greatest horror directors of all time is his the fact that he wasn't a huge horror fan, and that is what made him so great. Is that he I think early in his life, around his Night of the Living Dead or whatnot, he was a horror head, but that dissipated very quickly. And, years later, he never watched horror, but that's the corner he was in. That's the corner he had to work from. And I think that ended up being a huge blessing to us because his interests were so wide. He wanted to work in every genre, which is a thing he and I share. I move genres almost every book. And he was never able to sort of wrangle that freedom to do that. But as a result, we get to see all of his interesting concerns and ideas filtered through the horror genre, which is what makes him so damn unique. So I think it was tough on him, but it was great for horror fans. But what's cool about Creepshow is, though, even though it's all horror, you get to see him flex his muscles a little bit in different mini genres. Like the creeping up on you isn't sci-fi by any means, but it sort of has the look and feel of a sci-fi movie. The Crate has a very sturdy sort of academic feel. The Creeping Up on You has a kind of a hairier, shaggier feel. So it's almost like he got to make 5 movies in 5 little different genres, and I think that's part of why. It's part of it proves how good he would have been at it. You know, like you go through his archive, he's got romances and he's got westerns, he's got sci-fi. He was omnivorous in his tastes and his desires to make different kind of movies that he never ever really got to make, with a couple really rare exceptions. You know, Night Riders probably being the most notable of them. In his career, it's sort of what should have been the tipping point for him. Like, it's such a great movie. It should have been the thing that made him a huge Hollywood commodity.
Yeah.
Which is another thing that didn't happen. And it's probably good that it didn't, because when he did, good for us versus good for George is a really interesting through line here. Because I think, as a lot of artists, he wanted to work on bigger and bigger films and have a canvas and money that was more expansive. And but when he did have a little bit of extra money and things like The Dark Half, he didn't have a good experience. Mm-hmm. So he tended to make his best stuff and his most interesting stuff when he was working independently. So again, it was sort of a negative for him, but a positive for us that things went how they went. And that's just Romero's life in a nutshell, starting with Night of the Living Dead. You know, negative for him that they didn't copyright it. He missed out on millions of dollars. Positive for the world because everyone got to see it and love it. So there's a lot to talk about here. But yeah, Creepshow is an interesting pivot, or would-be pivot point in his career, where he was given, he had a bunch of money, at least for him, it was a bunch of money, and knocked it out of the park. But yet it still didn't turn him into this big budget filmmaker like it could have.
Yeah, it's and like you said, I mean, it's there is something in the independent spirit of Romero that persists throughout his career that I think we all benefit from. And he was such a role model for the way that he was just able to keep getting things made outside of the standard Hollywood system. But yeah, there's a world where Creepshow blew up and he got to make The Stand, which was a Stephen King thing he wanted to make, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So it's interesting, but it's George Romero. There's always more to him than I think pop culture in general expects.
Oh yeah.
So we have come to the end of our time on this. I know we could talk about George Romero for hours and hours and hours, and we will hopefully on future episodes. But as we're talking today, Daniel is about to head out on book tour. By the time this episode goes up, he will be on book tour. So, Daniel, before we let you go, will you let everyone know where to find you online and what you have coming up?
Yeah, so we have danielkraus.com, Kraus. That has all your links to news and social media and the newsletter, which I highly recommend. And if you click on events, it has all the events of the tour that stretches on into this fall. And yeah, Angel Down out pretty much now. And then in October, I've got a graphic novel called Athanasia. That's sort of a horror version of a superhero story from the person in the world least likely to ever write a superhero story. This is why I did it. And then in March, something I'm super excited about, that's my book, Partially Devoured, which is a book ostensibly about Night of the Living Dead. It's a shot-by-shot progression through the movie that uses every shot and moment in the movie as a tangent machine to jump off and tell about how the movie was made, what it means to culture. And part of it's memoir too, sort of how that movie has been with me since I was 5, and has been with me and helped me and protected me at various points in my life. So it's what I'm calling a cinematic memoir, but there's really nothing else out there like it. And it has a bunch of original reporting, things that no one has ever known about Night of the Living Dead and the people involved with it. So it's kind of got some bombshells in there too. So I think it's a book I'm I'm really, really happy about and could have really worked on forever.
Yeah, I am very excited to read it, and I think anyone who wants to know more about the horror stories that shaped Daniel Kraus definitely will want to pick that up. Hopefully, we can have you back next year to talk about Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, in a weird way, that book, Partially Devoured, might be to me as Dance Macabre is to Stephen King. Like it's
awesome.
It's sort of like it's about one thing instead of a million things, but really within that thing, there's a million tangents where it talks about everything else connected to it. But in a weird way, Dance Macabre was about how Stephen King became Stephen King, and Partially Devoured is about how I became me.
I'm looking forward to it. Our guest has been Daniel Kraus. Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Always great to have you on the show.
Yes, anytime at all. Thank you.
Thanks once again to Daniel Kraus for being on the show. It is always great to talk to him. It was super fun to talk to him about Stephen King and George Romero. Be sure to follow him online. He's got a lot of book events coming up for Angel Down. Some of them may be coming to your city. So if you want to celebrate a great book, get your book signed by a great writer, go check out what Daniel has going on. And if you want to check out everything we have going on, be sure to follow us on social media. The easiest place to do that is to find us on Blue Sky. We are at scareshapedus.bsky.social over there. That is where we post most of our updates, including giveaways. We just ran a giveaway for Angel Down, and it went really well. And I will have some more giveaways coming up in the near future, but you have to be following us on Blue Sky in order to enter the giveaway. So be sure you're doing that. We're also on Facebook. We're The Scares That Shaped Us on Facebook. We are also The Scares That Shaped Us on YouTube. If you prefer to listen to podcasts on YouTube, it's audio only over there at this point. But hey, like, subscribe. Maybe one day we'll add some video content. But for now, every single episode of the show is available to listen to on YouTube. And if you want to just follow me, the easiest place to do that is over on Blue Sky. I am at awalrusdarkly.bsky.social. And you can also find that handle in the profile of the Scares That Shaped Us Blue Sky page. I know it's silly. I refuse to change it because it is my brand now, y'all. And I got to stick to the brand of being a strange dark walrus who posts about horror films and things I'm reading and all of that all the time. I'm literally in the middle of a engagement farming weird prompt about hot takes on horror right now as I'm talking to you. I'm doing that on Blue Sky. So if that's the kind of thing you enjoy, head over there and follow me. You can also email the show if you have a question, something you'd like to hear me talk about on air, a guest that you'd like to request, anything like that. You can send that to scaresthatshapeduspodcast@gmail.com. We appreciate you reaching out. And of course, if you like the show, please tell your friends, share our episodes, let people know about us, get the word out. If you use a podcasting app to listen to your podcast, please head over there and give us a 5-star review. That helps us to build an audience because we get featured if we have more 5-star reviews, and people will notice us, and hopefully people will listen and we will grow. And our roster of guests will grow along with us because I want to keep doing this show forever. I love it so much. That's it for us this week. We will be back next week, August 6th, with a brand new episode. Our guest will be Gretchen Felker Martin, who is promoting her amazing new novel, Black Flame, right now. We talked about Black Flame. And we also did a little bit of a swerve from our usual concept because Gretchen had what I think is an excellent point to make. So we're going to talk some kinder trauma and some trans awakenings and things like that next week with The Last Unicorn. Yes, I know it is nominally a fantasy story, but just listen next week and you'll hear about it. And you get to hear Gretchen talk about it. And Gretchen is fucking brilliant. So Gretchen Felker Martin, August 6th, noon Central. Be there. That's it for us this week. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. I'm Matthew Jackson, and this is The Scares That Shaped Us.